Alright, guys. Sorry, I'm on the phone. It's a bad angle. It's a whole fucking thing with my laptop. I'm watching it literally like implode right now, so phone's gonna have to work. Idiocracy. Um, Idiocracy. I used to when Trump was elected, I tweeted this thing because I've always used this. I might have. I don't think I put it on for your class, but I used to, for humor across the media, use the question like, "Is idiocracy plausible?" Like that was a paper topic. You could write about. You could write your paper about that, and most people were like, "Oh, it's a cute movie." Like a bunch of your comments were like, "Oh, it's silly, cute, but never. Come on, it's ridiculous." And then when Trump was elected, I tweeted something out like to all those former students who said no to that paper topic. I'm going back and failing you. So it's it's like and who said this? This was Aiden. Aiden mentioned you all mentioned it, but I can't stress enough, like 500 years. Like think about 500 years. Think about where we are now and the trajectory of that in 500 years, right? And I I think of it this way. Think about 500 years ago. Where were we? Right? So much, like that's such a long time. So if you think about 500 years ago and now where we're at, and then 500 years in the future, like this is more than plausible. This is like this is inevitable. I'm I'm every year I teach this, I get more and more convinced that this is inevitable. And these discussions are sort of bittersweet in that way. Um, so so idiocracy. I wrote this down because it rings very true. Uh, it's the adult version of Wall-E. I'm assuming you all grew up with Wall-E, right? The little robot who's in this post-apocalyptic world where people just fucking shit all over the earth and it was inhabitable. So they all went up in space and got fat and lazy, right? Like it's it's the same idea. Um, Even if you notice the, it's almost like a shot for shot remake of the opening of um, Wall-E and Idiocracy, where the garbage avalanche, right? That's very similar to that opening shot in Wall-E, where all the garbage is just sort of like piled up and things like that. Um, so it's, I think that's interesting. Like, because I took my kids to see Wall-E when it came out, and I was like, oh man, this movie has like some balls to it. Like, this is about something. And I was like, to the kids, I'm like, what's this movie about? They're like, oh, the robot fell in love, and I'm like, no, you idiots, it's not about that. It's about how we're like careening towards this sort of this world where we're too reliant on technology. We don't, we're obese, we're stupid, we're, you know, reliant on the technology to get us through the day, whatever it is. And they're like, what? They were, I don't know, like 10 and 7 or something. Um, But that always, that's interesting to me, the correlation between the two movies, um, as the adult version of Wall-E. Uh, what does that mean? This movie changed the way I teach these concepts. I don't know what that means. It's written down at some point. Can't stress enough 500 years. Like, I can't stress enough 500 years. Oh, I know what it means. This movie changed the way I teach these concepts. Like, I remember when this movie came out, I was just starting this course. I was like, what movies are there that are about the media or whatever? And someone presented this to me, and I hadn't thought about it and being critical of the media. Like, cause my approach was always at the beginning, like how the media can save us, right? So like that's how I looked at it. So when someone suggested this movie, I was like, oh, this is anti-media. But then I'm like, but it sort of opened this whole new window of criticism through which I could view these different comedy or humorous things. So Idiocracy did that for me. It's just another angle to look at things from, if that makes any sense. There's the whole lead, follow, or get out of the way that kind of starts the movie, right? Luke Wilson's character is like, you know, there's that whole scenario, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Because to me, that implies you're not supposed to do any of those. Because leading seems like this sort of leads to corruption, this quest for power. Following is, obviously just going along with whatever regardless. And like getting out of the way is not caring or letting it all happen. There has to be like a fourth thing there. Get in the way? Maybe that's the one, right? You're not supposed to lead because there's something about the desire to lead that is easily corruptible. That's my take. Don't follow because you're just a sheep or a robot or whatever. Don't get out of the way, not care. Get in the way. That should be the fourth one there. And Joe kind of gets in the way, right? But by accident for the most part. Again, 500 years. It's a long fucking time. So if you take all of the things that are going on right now that have already gotten worse within the last 10 years, like what is to change those trajectories over the next 500? That's what you have to think about. I'm not saying you can't just write it off as no. Like Marco was like, it's not plausible. Right? To the point where I'm like, it's literally happening right now. Like, in the last 5 years, like since the whole Trump era, you can count any number of things. The anti-intellectualism, like rampant anti-intellectualism, and trying to put a premium on education and learning and trying to curb it at all costs. And a bunch of you mentioned that, like this anti-intellectualism is what this movie's about and what happens as a result. Like, it is happening. Like, the conservative right is, let's put it this way, education has become a liberal, it's not, but it's perceived as a liberal venture and learning and education. So, and that's just as a result of shitty politics and, bullshit back and forth. But yeah, if you're a college graduate, you're an elitist scumbag, right? And you think you're better than people who don't have it. Like that's not really the case, but that's how it's been sort of morphed in our society. Um, I'd also argue this movie, like there's we had a string of post-apocalyptic movies. I'm like, this one's way more plausible than fucking I Am Legend or something, where Will Smith and his dog fucking battle zombies in post-apocalyptic New York or whatever, or The Day After Tomorrow, which is supposed to be this whole environmentalist allegory. Like, this one is the one, right? If Day After Tomorrow is this projection of, like, here's what's going to happen to the environment, these tidal waves and ice ages and all this stuff, okay. This one, as Idiocracy, is the most plausible of all those, like, post-apocalyptic movies. Um, so, yeah, and I have, it's up to regular people to save the world, right? That's kind of the message here. It's up to the most average person, right, in the world to save the world. That's us, right? This is back to what we we're talking about with the onion, right? That's that's the general public. Like, we need to get in the way. Don't move, or don't lead, don't follow, don't get out of the way. Get in the way. Um, and I think that's one of the themes in the movie is it's up to regular people, quote unquote, to save the world. You don't have to be, a genius. You don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to be. You just have to have some common sense and some. You have to care about something. Like, Joe goes through his life before the experiment, just not really, just looking to not be noticed, right, and stay out of the fray. And then he starts to care about, things, and that seems to be, yeah, just a regular, caring person. That's who's going to change the world. It's not going to be your politicians. It's not going to be, athletes. It's not going to be CEOs. It's going to be just regular dudes and ladies just sifting through the bullshit of it all. There's so many similarities. They talk about how, and who brought this up? Aiden brought up there's some technological advancements in the movie that are pretty cool. So we're continuing to advance. But my argument is against that idea. That he brought up the barcode that can stop the car and do all that stuff. Like, all of that technology is used to oppress people in the movie. And isn't that where we're headed with all this technology? Every technological advancement is pretty much designed to watch us and sort of market to us and sell to us. So all the technology there is to oppress. It's used by those in power to oppress the people and keep them dumb, right? In the movie, I'm saying, and I would argue right now, like, the programming, right? Ow My Balls is, I mean, that's obviously a Jackass. It's a reduction of what Jackass is down to its core, right? Or America's Funniest Home Videos, or whatever. It's obviously a parody of that. And Dax Shepard's character, Frito, he's just sitting in his toilet chair, masturbating and watching All My Balls. So, like, He has this big screen. It's got 50 different things on it. It's like all that, like most like entertainment media is meant to like sort of numb the public and keep them distracted from what's really going on. So in this case, the case of the barcode stuff that Aiden was saying, hey, it's it's kind of cool technology that it works that way, but it's all implemented to oppress these other people. So the Hardys, right? Hardys took over, or Jack in the Box, Carl's Jr., Carl's Jr. I think they're all owned by the same company in real life, anyway. The vending machines with that just basically screw you out of money, right, and call you a bad mother or whatever. Like that technology is implemented to oppress those who can't afford or do anything else. So, yeah, I think we will continue to advance technologically, but will we, me and you, like the public, or is it those in power using it to manipulate us and things like that? Will it be used to oppress us in the way that it is in the movie? And all signs point to yes at this point. Um, but that point of like it's up to regular people to save the world, right? It's no different than like Dodgeball, the movie, right? Average Joes. That's the name of the gym. That's the name of the team. And what do? They sort of topple the corporate, sort of heartless corporate entity of Globo Gym. That's a little less nuanced than Idiocracy, but I think it's definitely a theme. It's a comedic theme, for sure. Um, the commodification of the government. Like, our government has been bought and sold over and over again. Lobbyists paying for Senate seats and House seats and having all this influence and these, all these NRA lobbyists and big pharma and all this stuff. Like, the government has been bought. And here is obviously, it's a ridiculous example, but is it not plausible within 500 years that the entire government will be owned by Brondo? I mean, again, this is Mike Judge, who did Beavis and Butthead, who did King of the Hill. He's always done like satirical comedies like this. He's looking at the current situation. Of course, this movie's from like 2005, right? So just from the time this movie has been made, which is like almost 20 years, things have headed towards these results, right? So you see the concept of the movie, right? It's like, okay, what is troubling right now? What is troubling right now with our government, our economy, our education, our media, whatever it is, and like extrapolate out 500 years, and where do you think we'll be? Well, I think most of what he's saying is it will get way worse before it gets better. Let's put it that way. And I don't necessarily disagree with him. So the whole Brondo angle, right? How they they bought the government. Like, we're not even 500 years away from that. We're like 10 years away from that, it seems like. So anti-intellectualism, a bunch of you brought that up. I liked Andrew's comment about anti versus pseudo-intellectualism. That was really interesting because there is a difference, right? Pseudo-intellectualism is acting like right? which is, that's rampant now with social media, how it exacerbates all of these kinds of things, and how, like, the burned orange thing, like, spreads it like wildfire, spreads misinformation seemingly for some reason, probably because it's sensationalized and it's sexier, but misinformation gets rampantly spread in a fraction of the time. And it's this, well, I saw it on Twitter, so I know, right? That pseudo intellectualism versus just completely denying it. That was an interesting distinction to make, for sure. But we're currently in this anti-intellectualist movement, and this goes back to the Bush era. It was very, you know, let's not learn too much, because the more questions you ask, the more truth you uncover, and then exposed are those who sort of, aren't operating on the up and up. And it's like with critical race theory. I know it's a hot topic these days, but that's saying, no, don't teach people things. That's basically what they're saying. Is the people who are sort of implicated by it don't want you to learn about it. So let's just keep it as it is, right? Well, keep it as it is has not been working out for us too well. Idiocracy. The culture at once acknowledges things suck, but don't do anything about it. Right? They're all like, yeah, this sucks, but so what? So they're sort of getting out of the way, right? Or follow. I guess they're following. They're following for the most part. Instead of, like, Joe sort of gets in the way. He kind of realizes someone needs to do something, so it might as well be me. But that at once acknowledging that things suck, but not doing anything about it. Why? Because they have their shitty TV shows. They have the movie Ass. They have Meat Supreme, right? And the whole rehabilitation, right? Which is, that whole angle. They have all these things distracting them from what's really in the way of them being successful and happy and sort of fulfilled. Is, don't worry, you have all this stuff. So that's, they highlight the media's role in sort of numbing everybody, and keeping them at bay. The comparisons between President Camacho and President Trump are, like, almost too, like, scary. And when The Rock becomes the president of the United States, we'll all have a nice little laugh about that, because that's coming sooner in your lifetime. Dwayne Johnson will be president of the United States, and you'll be like, fuck, Vaughn was right. It's been 3 years and not 500. So there are so many. The one that always jumps out at me between Camacho and Trump, and again, this sort of foreshadowing of our culture, was Camacho is like, we got this guy, not sure, and he's going to fix all the problems. This is exactly the same as Trump saying, we have the best people, right? And we're going to fix all the like, just saying these generic things based on nothing, right? But yeah, when The Rock is president, you'll see. Well, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was sweet. Um, Also, yeah, back to the commodification of the government, right? And Brondo's influence over everything, right? Consolidation of power, basically. I mean, how is Brondo any different than right now, like what Google is or what Amazon is, um, in terms of just just gobbling everything up and putting their name on it? And I don't think that's a good. Again, it's trending already towards Brondo, and what do the people say? It's what plants crave. What do plants crave? Electrolytes. What are electrolytes? It's what plants crave. Like, you hear those, right, corporate slogans and things like that enough, and you just start like, that's the truth. Well, what are electrolytes? Nobody knows really what they are. I mean, if you have a chance, go to YouTube and look up Power Thirst. There's actually there Brondo was actually a drink that was produced for a short time, and then they look up Power Thirst. They do these commercial parodies of Brondo basically, and they're pretty funny, and not too much of an exaggeration of what's happening. Um, so yeah, the ambitious stupidity that came up in the second video that I sent, where they're talking about, um, idiocracy would be a utopia compared to what we have now because of that notion of ambitious stupidity, which is that's such a good way to break it down, because that's what we have now. I think that's pseudo intellectualism is basically what he's saying. Back to Andrew's comment, like that pseudo intellectualism of stupid people who think they're smart, basically, right? And who are ambitious and taking that pseudo intellectualism and using it as this catalyst for power, or yeah, or a voice or something. Um, that that was my biggest takeaway, from there. And somebody, I can't remember who brought up the justice system. Right, there's the whole scene in the courtroom, and are we not at that point? I mean, forget about overturning Roe v. Wade. Like, just public opinion is now the sort of the court that everyone cares about or notices or acknowledges. The warped justice system is so far gone, and now public opinion seems to be the court that everybody is concerned with, right? And that's exactly what happened there. Like, Joe didn't stand a chance, right, in that situation. Um, so I think this movie is great for this class, right? Because it brings up all these kinds of things, and it starts to make you think about, like, everything that's going on right now is just the germ of something bigger. You have to think that way. And if that's the case, like, it's just like 500 years of more of this is is not good. And it's not only I think it's not only plausible, it's inevitable. I hate to tell you guys that. I want you guys to, well, we'll be gone. We'll be long gone. So I guess it doesn't matter that much. But maybe it won't take 500 years. As I said, the timeline is shrinking, mostly because, I mean, it's a complete shit show out there, right? we all know that. Marco brought up, he said it wasn't plausible, but then, my response was, it's literally happening. Like, all of these connections that I just talked about are happening right now. Like, a lot. And then he said, maybe if there was an epidemic or something. And I'm like, oh, like COVID? That that completely sort of divides the country. That's another thing that the movie kind of glosses over. Like, we don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. But think about right now with Roe v. Wade being turned over. The initial concept of the movie is that dumb people are reproducing at a rate that is, that far outweighs those of the intellectual, right? And that's a very simplified, cute, jokey way of starting this movie. But with Roe v. Wade being turned over, and, you know, women's rights and abortion rights being removed, like, aren't we? Isn't that a huge leap closer to that theory coming true? I mean, I don't know. Possibly. And, like, COVID divided us. But that's what my point is. The rest of the world, right? We don't know what's going on in the rest of the world in Idiocracy. That's just our country. But our country doesn't give a fuck about the rest of the world, so I guess it kind of makes that point too. Um, but that's interesting. How Roe v. Wade plays into the whole, the whole concept of the movie, and how it starts out, with, you know, morons reproducing at a rate that far outweighs, you know, even just regular people or smart people. But also to the technology, because Aiden brought up the technology and the barcode thing, and I talked about how it's used to oppress. But the beginning of the movie talks about how, yeah, we're super intelligent and we have all this technology, but most of it is focused on, like, the shittiest parts of ourselves. So it's like hair loss and boners, like, yeah, bad boners. And how can we, right, how can we solve all these sort of trivial problems, I guess? Um, right. So that's another trend that Mike Judge is sort of forecasting. Like, eventually we'll stop working on things that can help the world and save the world, and we'll just focus on these stupid things, these things that, boob jobs and ED treatment and hair, like, all that stuff. Um, that's one of the points that the movie makes. Gabe brought up corporate run everything, which I had talked about just before, and I'm saying, like, how are we not halfway there already, right? Right now with lobbyists, and I mean, it's not. We're at least halfway there, at least. Um, I like, Michelle. I like that you connected it to Patriot Act and Onion and Michael Che. Like, you sort of brought all those things together, like the effects that the media can have if it's not sort of used properly, I guess. Um, Idiocracy as an extension of the Patriot Act and the Onion and shows of its ilk. Um, I like that. That's a cool idea. That's a cool way to connect all of this stuff together, which is really what the class is about. Is like seeing humor as this uh, sort of unified criticism of the culture that we live in. So when you can make those connections, that's always a plus. Um, I think that's everybody. Mentioned Andrews. And I got pretty much everything I wanted to cover. So, um, final week, papers, get me your papers this coming weekend. Keep commenting. Always enjoy reading those. And watch my videos. And, you know, have a good week. Phone.